I didn't realize how quiet my life was until the night it stopped being quiet. Before that, everything followed a pattern. Wake up, commute, work, go home, repeat. Nothing was wrong exactly, but nothing felt real either. I existed in that space where days pass without leaving a mark, where you don't feel unhappy enough to complain, but not alive enough to feel satisfied. I worked at the same company for almost 3 years without anyone really knowing me. I was reliable. That was my label. The guy who stayed late. The guy who fixed things. The guy who never said no. People like that don't get promoted quickly, but they don't get questioned either. My boss was the opposite. She was sharp in a way that made people nervous. Calm, controlled, always a step ahead. She didn't raise her voice, didn't overshare, didn't joke around. Meetings were efficient. Conversations stayed professional. Boundaries were clear, or at least that's what I thought. The night everything changed started with an email sent 10 minutes after office hours. Can you stay back? I need help with something. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I sighed, put my bag down and walked back to her office. She looked different that night. Not dramatic, just tired, like someone who had been holding themselves together for too long. Papers were spread across her desk, untouched. We worked in silence at first, numbers, reports, screens glowing in the dark office. After a while, she leaned back in her chair and rubbed her face with both hands. I can't focus anymore, she said. Let's step out for a minute. I assumed she meant fresh air. Instead, she grabbed her coat. There's a place nearby, she added. It's quiet. The bar was almost empty. Low music, dim lights. We sat next to each other, not across the table. She ordered a drink and stared at it longer than she should have. Do you ever feel like you're living the life people expect from you? She asked, instead of the one you actually want? The question caught me off guard. Yes, I said. Every day. She nodded slowly. Like that answer mattered. Something shifted after that. The conversation loosened. She talked about pressure, about being responsible for everything, about how everyone saw her as strong, so no one ever checked if she actually was. I told her how invisible I felt, how being dependable made people forget you were human. She smiled once, a real smile, soft and brief. I don't usually talk like this, she said. I don't let people see this side of me. I won't tell anyone, I replied without thinking. She didn't respond, just took a sip of her drink. When the bar closed, neither of us rushed to leave. Outside, the air was cold. She wrapped her arms around herself and stood still, staring down the street. I don't want to be alone tonight, she said quietly. There was no flirtation in her voice, just honesty. I offered to walk her home. Her apartment was clean, almost too clean. No photos, no clutter. It felt more like a hotel room than a place someone lived. She kicked off her shoes and leaned against the counter, staring at the wall. I shouldn't have said that, she murmured. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. We sat on the couch with space between us at first. She talked about her childhood, about learning early that showing emotion meant losing control, about how she built her career by never letting anyone see cracks. Her voice faltered, then stopped. When she started crying, it was quiet, controlled, like she didn't want the room to hear her. I reached out without thinking. My hand rested lightly on her arm. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. Her breathing was uneven at first, then slowly steadied. I could feel how tense she'd been, how badly she needed to stop pretending for just a moment. We stayed like that longer than either of us acknowledged. Eventually, she pulled back and looked at me with an expression that still stays with me. Fear mixed with resolve. If this goes any further, she said, you can never tell anyone. The words felt heavier than they should have. Not a friend, not a coworker, not years from now. I knew what she was asking. I knew what agreeing would mean. I should have stood up. I didn't. I nodded. That night wasn't dramatic. It wasn't reckless. It was slow, careful, almost sad. Two people crossing a line, not out of excitement, but out of exhaustion. In the morning, everything was different. She was calm again, professional, distant, like the night before had never happened. As I was leaving, she stopped me at the door. "Last night didn't happen," she said, "and if it did, it stays between us." I agreed. At work, nothing changed. No awkward looks, no tension, no acknowledgement. She treated me exactly the same as before, which somehow hurt more than if she'd avoided me. Weeks passed, then months. I told myself it was over, that it had been a moment of weakness, that it didn't matter. But silence is heavy when you carry it alone. I noticed small things, how she avoided elevators with me, how meetings were never one-on-one anymore, how she delegated through others instead of speaking to me directly. Then one morning, her office was empty. She had resigned. No announcement, no goodbye email. Just gone. I felt something close to grief, a loss I had no right to claim. We never spoke again. Life moved on. I changed jobs, moved apartments, built a new routine. On the surface, everything improved. But silence doesn't disappear. It waits. 3 years later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I hope you kept your promise." My chest tightened instantly. I did. A pause. Then, "Good, because someone else is asking questions now." I stared at the screen for a long time. I never replied. I deleted the conversation. And I'm telling this story now because I finally understand something. Some promises protect people. Others protect the damage they leave behind. And silence isn't neutral. It always chooses a side. After I deleted the messages, I sat there longer than I expected. Phone still in my hand, screen dark. The room quiet in a way that felt intentional, almost accusatory. Like the silence was waiting to see what I'd do next. I told myself I was done with it, that I'd kept my promise, that whatever was happening now wasn't my responsibility. But that wasn't entirely true, because once you're pulled back into a memory like that, you don't just remember what happened. You remember how it felt. And worse, you start noticing how it shaped everything that came after. In the weeks following her resignation, I pretended nothing had changed. I told myself people leave jobs all the time. Managers move on, life goes forward. But the office felt different. Her chair stayed empty for days before anyone touched it. Meetings felt louder, less controlled. Decisions took longer. The calm authority she carried with her vanished overnight, and everyone felt it, even if no one said it out loud. Someone eventually took over her role. A different energy, more approachable, less intimidating. But I avoided that office hallway for months, not because I was afraid of running into her, but because I was afraid of what I'd feel if I didn't. I noticed changes in myself too. I stopped staying late, stopped volunteering for extra work. I started saying no more often, even when I didn't have a reason. Not out of confidence, but out of exhaustion. There was a part of me that felt used, another part that felt complicit, and a smaller, quieter part that still felt connected to her in a way I didn't know how to explain. That was the hardest part. There was no villain in the story, no clear victim either. Just two people who crossed a line and decided silence was easier than consequences. When I left that company, I didn't mention her name once. No exit interview confession. No closure conversation. I packed my things and walked out like nothing significant had ever happened there. But the truth followed me. In my next job, I was careful. Almost overly so. I avoided one-on-one situations with supervisors. I kept conversations neutral, professional, safe. Anytime a conversation drifted towards something personal, I redirected it. I laughed things off, changed the subject. People probably thought I was reserved. They had no idea I was guarding something. Dating was harder than I expected. Not because I didn't meet people, but because I felt like I was always holding something back. There was a version of me that existed in that apartment, on that couch during that quiet night, and no one I met afterward ever knew him. I'd lie in bed next to someone and think about how strange it was that intimacy could feel lonelier than silence, that being physically close didn't mean being seen. I never told anyone what happened, not friends, not partners, not even strangers online, until now. The message from that unknown number didn't just bring back the memory, It brought back the fear. Someone else was asking questions. That meant the silence might not hold forever. I started replaying every detail, every interaction, every place we'd been seen together. The bar, the walk, the timing. Had anyone noticed? Had anyone suspected? At work, rumors traveled fast. But this had stayed buried for years. I wondered who could be asking. A former coworker? A new employer doing background checks? Someone from her personal life I never knew existed? The uncertainty gnawed at me. For the first time, I considered what would happen if the truth came out without my control. Would I be blamed? Would she deny it? Would silence suddenly become betrayal? I realized then how uneven the promise had always been. For her, silence meant protection. For me, it meant obligation. She moved on, changed jobs, changed cities maybe, built a new life. I stayed still. That imbalance bothered me more than the memory itself. A few days after the message, I almost replied again. Almost asked who was asking questions. Almost broke the rule I'd followed for years. But I didn't, because some promises don't end cleanly. They decay. And once you start pulling at them, you don't know what else will come undone. I still don't know who sent that message. I still don't know what questions are being asked. And maybe I never will. But I've learned something important since then. Silence isn't the absence of truth. It's a decision to delay it. And delays have consequences. I don't regret what happened that night. Not entirely. I regret the way it was handled. The way responsibility was disguised as discretion. The way silence was framed as maturity instead of avoidance. If I could go back, I don't know if I'd make a different choice. But I know I wouldn't agree to disappear from my own story. Because the cost of keeping that promise wasn't paid all at once. It was paid slowly, in distance, in hesitation, in the version of myself I never fully became. And that's what no one tells you about silence. It doesn't just hide the past, it quietly rewrites your future.